Romeo and Juliet are two young star-crossed lovers. Both their families are rivals, Montagues and the Capulets, and their relationship is forbidden. Today I stand before you and show you the hard evidence against Father Lawrence. He is a man that should be trusting, though is not trustworthy. In Romeo and Juliet, Father Lawrence is one held responsible for both their deaths. Because first, he never should have married Romeo and Juliet to begin with. Second, he never should have given Juliet the sleeping potion to fake her death. And finally, he never should have left the distraught Juliet alone in the tomb after Romeo had just killed himself. What sane person leaves a young distraught girl alone? That's right, Father Lawrence does. All these things make him negligent and directly responsible for their deaths. Father Lawrence was a mentor to both Romeo and Juliet. He was constantly trying to give them the right advice and for them to think before they act. He didn't follow his own advice, so when he quickly made the decision to marry these two love crazy kids. Now, this was Father Lawrence's first mistake. He never should have agreed to marry them in the first place. By marrying them, he went against his religious beliefs. Romeo to Father Lawrence, as Romeo is trying to convince him to marry him and Juliet, to which he agrees. Then plainly known, my heart's dear love is set on the fair daughter of rich Capulet, as mine on hers, so hers is set on mine. And all combined, save that thou must combine by holy. By this I pray that those consent us to marry us today. Shakespeare, Trance, 2008, 2.3.60. He did so because he had an idea that their marriage may mark the end of the bitter feud between the two rivals. The part of his plan that wasn't thought out how was the couple would ultimately announce the marriage. Although his heart was certainly in the right place, his decision ignored the possibilities that several things could go wrong. This was the beginning of how Father Lawrence was to blame for Romeo and Juliet, as he married the two and now believe that they can't live without each other. Romeo claiming that he let the Juliet's kinsmen kill him if Juliet didn't love him. I have night's cloak to hide me from their eyes, but though love me, let them find me. My love was better end by their hate than death prolonged wanting of their love. 2008, 2.2.75. Father Lawrence managed to come up with many different ideas, but somewhat brilliant ideas. However, he would never take some possibilities into consideration, being the negative possibilities. One of his ideas, which he didn't think of all the variables, was when he gave Juliet the sleeping potion to fake her death. Though it first sounded like a good theory, it had too many variables. Father Lawrence states that take this vial, being then in bed, and his distilling liquor drink thy off, then presently through all warmth, no breath shall testify thou livest. The roses in thy lips and cheeks shall fall. 2.1.90 to 105. When Juliet came to him, he should have advised her to confess to her father of her relationship with Romeo. It was quite possible that, judging from the Capulets' expression of Romeo in his love for his daughter, that he might have understood, as he is convinced that it will be for the greater good if Juliet's parents suffer loss in believing she is dead, because when they learn she is alive, they will rejoice and forgive her for marrying Romeo. Father Lawrence's plan could have been successful, but his biggest mistake was not being able to get the message to Romeo that Juliet's death was fake. Father Lawrence, who bare my letter then to Romeo? Father John, I could not send it. Here it is again, nor get a message to bring it thee. So fearful were they of infection. 5.3.15. This mistake ultimately led to Romeo killing himself, as he thought Juliet, the love of his life, was dead, and he could not live without her. Therefore, Father Lawrence is to blame for Romeo and Juliet's death. In the end, Father Lawrence was a selfish man who only cared for himself and his fate. After Juliet found out that Romeo had killed himself, she states, "Where's here a cup closed in my true love's hand? O child, drunk all, and left no friendly drop to help me." 5.3.160. Father Lawrence selfishly only fears for his life when he rushes out of the tomb, while leaving a distraught Juliet alone, as she will not leave Romeo's side and refuses to go along with his suggestion of "Come, go, Juliet, I dare no longer stay." 5.3.171. This is all he says before he rushes out of the tomb. Father Lawrence also neglects to take both the sleeping potion, even though empty, he didn't know, and Romeo's dagger, which then allows Juliet to kill herself. Yai noise, then I'll be brief, oh happy dagger, taking Romeo's dagger. This is thy sheath. Stabs herself. Shakespeare 1.3.170. If he were to not just think about himself and stop to think about Juliet and taken the dagger, Juliet could have been saved, since the guard soon arrives and could have carried her out of the tomb soonly. This is the final reason as to why Father Lawrence is to blame for the deaths of Romeo and Juliet. Now, jury, would you allow this negligent man near your children? Father Lawrence was to blame for Romeo and Juliet's death. Though he tried to help the two lovers, his action had ultimately led to their suffering. He is to blame for their deaths, as he married the two when he should have told Juliet to tell her father. He came up with the idea to fake Juliet's death and was never able to get the message to Romeo. And finally, he never thought to say with the distraught Juliet, whose husband had just died in the tomb. Overall, Father Lawrence is the one that should be held responsible for the deaths of Romeo and Juliet. Thank you and goodbye.